Hey, Michael J.
Hey, Patrick. So here we are on a Friday, our second top-level podcast of the week. And,
exciting bonus episode.
Bonus episode. We have one of the iconic cards ever in the history of Magic the Gathering. One of maybe the most iconic one-drop in the history of Magic, I think, with this one. You think anyone else is higher up on the icon level?
I don't know. It's pretty hard to compete. My guess would be that this is the most iconic one-drop of all time.
I'm thinking most iconic one-drop of all time. The original Lightning Rod. Birds of Paradise.
Birds of Paradise is a true classic. I wouldn't be surprised if Birds of Paradise is one of the 10 most iconic cards in the history of Magic. This is a card with some history.
It might be the most iconic creature. I think almost certainly the most iconic one-drop. But I mean, this card it's whack, right? So this is a rule-breaking card before they realized there were rules to be had around the cards, right? Because is it from Alpha?
It is. Although, I mean, this is definitely one of those cards that they balanced on the Mox Jet exists.
Yes.
Like, Birds of Paradise is, like, aware that Mox Emerald, Mox Ruby, these are just things that exist.
Oh, yeah, I guess if it's in the same set as Black Lotus, it's a lot less offensive than it could have been, right?
Oh, yeah, there was some serious anchoring bias going on where it's like, they got rid of the Moxes in Black Lotus, and then it's like, well, Sol Ring isn't that bad. And then eventually they got rid of Sol Ring and Mana Vault, and they're like, well, yeah, but I mean, like, Birds of Paradise and Llanowar Elf aren't that bad. And then eventually it's like, actually, you can't just always just be shipping tons of one-mana fixers, let alone Birds of Paradise that just also fixes all your colors instead of just green. You know, like, it puts a lot of constraint on the format whenever they ever let there be one of these one-drops. And Birds of Paradise is the one that started it all.
It does so many different things in so many different iconic decks. And, like, that's beyond the fact. I mean, it's kind of a dumb card, right? And I don't mean dumb like stupid. I mean,
it's just overpowered.
Like stupid.
It just costs literally half as much mana as it should.
That's pretty good ability. And it's multiple abilities. So Birds of Paradise has served multiple different similar and disparate functions over the years, right? So it's the original redundancy card for deck design, right? This is a card that you play the 8-pack of Birds of Paradise and Llanowar Elves, and this is a card that's enabling decks like Fires of Yavimaya or Blue-Green Opposition, right? And it's just like, I have multiple cards that cost 1 mana, they cost green, so I'm really maximizing my ability to get the jump on the opponent, especially in formats where there's no Lightning Bolt.
Yeah, because, I mean, I think part of the deck building that has gone on, you know, this is some old school, original style, is that when you optimize, like, when you know you have Llanowar Elf in your deck, you want to play more 3-drops than you normally would and less 2-drops because your big plan is you're just going to go Llanowar Elf into 3-drop. And the risk of this is that if you just have 4 Llanowar Elves in your deck, 4 Llanowar Elves, you're only going to do that 40% of the time. And it makes it really risky to not play enough 2s, because what about the 60% of the time you don't draw Llanowar Elf, let alone if it ever dies, right? But when you play with
any of those creatures, a lot of the time, if you've got a 1-mana removal spell, it's just better to kill it than to try to forward your own, probably less powerful first turn thing, because they're going to be on a 3rd turn thing when you're on a 2nd turn thing, right?
Yeah. And then if you are playing 4 Birds of Paradise and 4 Llanowar Elves, suddenly you're talking about almost an 80%, you know, like 77, 78% chance. The vast majority of the time you're going to open up with, and that's not even counting the fact that obviously when you're mulliganing, you're going to want Llanowar Elf for Birds of Paradise a disproportionate amount of the time. So, like, now you get into the spot where you can actually reliably count on playing an accelerator on turn 1 so that you can actually build your deck around it. So it is the original redundancy card.
Yeah, and then there's just subtle things that, especially when you're playing with the redundancy, that cards like this just let you just double cheat. You're already cheating. Like, if you could go, you know, first turn Birds of Paradise, second turn Fires of Yavimaya, for example. Every future Llanowar Elf or Birds of Paradise that you draw is free, right? because they all get haste. So instead of actually having to like, oh, I'm forked, I have to think about my turn, is this worth this? You just play the elf and then tap it immediately to keep going with your turn, which is subtly really, really powerful. And the same is true for opposition decks, where you have these creatures that, the goal of them in your deck design, I guess it's twofold, but you're just trying to get the jump on your opponent. But later, every single Llanowar Elf or Birds of Paradise you draw is actually an Icy Manipulator. That's so powerful.
Yep. Same thing with Vitu-Ghazi, or with the Glare of Subdual, I mean.
Yeah.
Like, whenever you have a card like Glare of Subdual or Opposition, and they make them once in a while, whenever you have a card like that lets you convert your extra bodies into taps, one obvious place to go to is using tokens, but another place to go to is creatures that their utility may have waned. Like Llanowar Elf, super good on turn 1 or 2. Birds of Paradise, best thing you can do to open with in most decks. But when you get later in the game, maybe the 0/1 flyer that's producing your 7th mana, you don't need the mana as much. It's nice that it's a Icy Manipulator with haste that doesn't cost any mana to use. And I think, though, that it's important to note the difference in Birds of Paradise versus all these other ones. Like Llanowar Elf, Findorn Elf. I mean, there's so many different Elvish Mystic. There's been so many different 1-drops to tap for a green. And there's been a few. Like occasionally you get Elves of Deep Shadow. And there's even, Noble Hierarch is Noble Hierarch and Deathrite Shaman are two that are like in contention for even just stronger than Birds of Paradise objectively.
I think they both make a good case, yeah.
But they both have their own requirements. Deathrite Shaman, first of all, it requires you to be playing Legacy or higher. But second of all,
Deathrite Shaman, that's not even very good if you don't have other things surrounding it, right? It just doesn't do anything sometimes. But it just so happens that when it's in the right context, it's wildly powerful.
Right. But, when you have the right context, sure. But that's it doesn't do it all. You're comboing it with things like fetch lands. It's a very different experience. And a lot of its power comes from the graveyard interactions and direct damage. It's just a different kind of card. Noble Hierarch is closer to Birds of Paradise, but it's like halfway. It beats down more than it beats down a lot like Llanowar Elf, and it produces more colors, kind of like Birds of Paradise, but it doesn't do either one fully. It's a little bit more than the sum of the parts, but again, that's a card that isn't normal, it isn't available. And Noble Hierarch is awesome, but Birds of Paradise producing all 5 colors is a big deal. And there have been times in the past where people have chosen Birds of Paradise over Noble Hierarch, specifically because of the need to produce black or red mana in addition to their green. But in addition to just producing all 5 colors, and Birds of Paradise is, this is a card that not only has it aged well, it has over the years appeared in just about every combination of green deck you could imagine, including countless 5-color green decks, where you're making all 5 different colors over the course of the game. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, it's not just that it's the original redundancy with Llanowar Elf. Because, it's easy for it to be the original redundancy because those two guys have about the same mana cost, and they were printed together originally. So, yeah, it makes sense. We'll build decks around this. But Birds of Paradise has enabled these really just fancy decks over the years, right?
Including the first world champion. Zach Dolan, the first Magic the Gathering world champion, won the first Magic World Championships using a deck, a Bant, what we would now call a Bant deck, that used the killer combo of sometimes you put Instill Energy on your Birds of Paradise so that you can pay for stasis forever.
Wow. I was just thinking
they don't make combos like they used to, man.
I was just thinking about the Sol Malka era where we were just I'm going to cast this Birds of Paradise and it's going to enable me to cast Shadow Mage Infiltrator on the second turn. Because that's pretty novel, right? My green creature on turn 1 makes my black and blue creature on turn 2. That's pretty novel.
Or 5-color green like Matt Place and Kathy Nikoloff when they used Birds of Paradise power, in conjunction with Queer and Ranger to untap it and also get extra mana out of the forests.
The 16 land deck? Oh my god.
When
that
8 of your
so well.
when 8 of your lands are basic forest and 8 of your lands are 5-color lands, like Undiscovered Paradise and City of Brass, between 4 Undiscovered Paradises, 4 City of Brasses, and 4 Birds of Paradise, they were actually able to support splashing every color. You know, splashing red for Incinerate, or white for Swords to Plowshares, or blue for Arcane Denial, or in Mana War. You know, black, sideboard, some kind of terror. You know, like having access to all these different types of cards, powered by this novel, brand new 5-color mana base with Birds of Paradise at the center, which also, incidentally, worked very, very well with their Winter Orb strategy.
That was like the original elbow drop, right? Like, I can't think before that. Wait, is that after Turbostasis, actually? I remember the first time there was a deck that just took it was regional championships, I want to say 1997? So it must have been the year after Turbostasis, but a deck comes out of nowhere.
Turbostasis was the deck that Matt Place, Mike Long, Derek, like all of them.
Scott Johns.
Yeah, they busted it out at Nationals
96.
When Alliances was the new set, because Lindell's Vault was the card that brought that together. Whereas a year later, Visions brought us Queen and Ranger and Undiscovered Paradise, which combined with Queen and Ranger combined with Winter Orb and Birds of Paradise, killer combo that changed the face of Magic forever.
Oh man, Winter Orb and Mana War and your opponent's lands, and thawing glaciers for that matter, right? So people were still thawing at that point.
Mm-hmm.
That was I guess it wasn't the original elbow drop, but Birds did some work there. So So Birds has another ability, right? So I think that the seldom recognized ability on Birds of Paradise. So this story comes from my favorite Birds of Paradise story, Tournament, but it has a sad ending instead of a happy ending. So it's the last round of Swiss, and this is Grand Prix, I want to say Milwaukee? Grand Prix Milwaukee?
Oh, no.
Is this 2002 or 2003?
2002.
So Grand Prix Milwaukee.
I promise you it wasn't 2003. I wasn't able to hit too many tournaments that year, but right, 2002.
2002. So my favorite Birds of Paradise story is also in the same tournament. But so I'm playing a Birds of Paradise deck. I'm playing blue, teamer opposition, and I am ahead of almost all my friends in record at the beginning of day 2. And I have to lose. I have to lose 3 in a row to not make top 8, and lose 4 in a row to not qualify on the pass down. And I see Kibler scrapes by me. I actually lose to Mike Turian. I think I win one. So then I'm playing for the slot, just a pass down slot because there's so many pros in the top 8. And my opponent in the last round of Swiss is Brian Kowal, who's one of my best friends, right? And
a hell of a mage.
Hell of a mage. One of my best friends, my Righteous Babe teammate. But we're playing at basically the end of a PTQ, and I'm on a bad run here. I was doing great at the beginning of the tournament. And if I just win this one, I'm gonna go to the Pro Tour. But so is Brian, right? So he's also playing a Birds of Paradise deck. He's playing Green Red Beatdown with Birds of Paradise, and I'm playing Teamer, right? So we go to sideboards, and I have so many jungle barriers, right? I've got, all the jungle barriers. I have a handful of cards. I'm just, drawing extra cards, picking off his guys with Flame Tongue Kavu one at a time. I can't really get in because, the board is gumming up on the ground. And Kowal looks at me, looks at his hand, what he just drew, asks me what I'm at, and I'm 7 or something, and he's just Birds, Reckless Charge, Flashback, Reckless Charge, kill you. Because Birds of Paradise has flying. He Reckless Charges it to give it
6
haste.
Right there?
Yeah, and then just I guess I was at 6. And then just kills me in the sky. And Dave Price is watching, and he's just that's the greatest ending of any match ever. And I'm dude, I just lost a Pro Tour slot. Why are you saying you're supposed to be my friend? He's just
yeah, but the world is a more beautiful place.
Yeah, he's just you thought you were going to win. Your blue deck was drawing all these cards, but Birds of Paradise with haste flew over all your jungle barriers and Flame Tongue Kabus, and you died. Quantum is one of my best friends too, in Magic. And of course I was happy for Cole, but I was pretty sad for me. However, later that same day, you can tell a story for a while.
No. I was actually going to jump to another part of the fact that Birds of Paradise has flying.
Okay.
Because I just think that Birds of Paradise, having flying, part of the reason why it comes up in so many cool stories like that, and that one's particularly sweet, but one of the reasons why it comes up so often is that Green doesn't really get a lot of flyers. So, like, what Green does get, though, is ways to pump its creatures up, often in funny, weird ways, whether it's Giant Growth or Might of Oaks, Yes, or Sword of a Sword of Fire and Ice.
Oh, I'm sure there have been a number of, probably not modern, but extended tournaments where people were just murdering each other with Birds of Paradise wearing Sword of Fire and Ice.
Oh, it comes up in Legacy even today.
How it goes, man.
Comes up in Legacy even today. The spikes, Spike Feeder. I know I've moved some spikes, because that's the curve. You go turn 1, Birds of Paradise, turn 2, tap the bird to cast Spike Feeder, then turn 3, tap out just to move spikes onto the bird that can't even attack that turn. But sometimes that's the plan. Sometimes. That's just...
So here's an interesting separate story. So I want to say Regionals 2010, because me and BDM both qualified for that Regionals. BDM was playing a Vengevine deck designed by Jerry Thompson. And I just remember this because he's playing for the slot. It's the last game of the last round, playing for the slot. Because, with top 8 or whatever qualifies. And I just go over and watch, and his opponent has Emrakul the Aeon's Torn in play. And I'm just like, he's dead. And Brian's just like, draws his card, looks at his hand, just has this like awful smile on his face, and he goes, birds go. His opponent's like, attack. And Brian's like, sacrifice all my permanents. Block. Right? And then the guy's just like, but to permanents he sacrificed for Vengevines. And then Brian's just like, he kept like a land or 2 or something. And he's just like, 1 drop, kill you. And I was just like, oh my God, it's so sick. Because birds just kept him alive. He's just like, he got annihilated for all of his permanents almost. And birds just like, absorbed 15. It was, it flies.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Birds of Paradise blocks Emrakul. Protection from colored spells. But that's not really the same as a Birds of Paradise in play. It's flown over a number of moats.
You think it's flown over a number of moats?
Well, I know that I've flown over a number of moats. Sometimes you got to fly over moat, man. You play so the way we used to do it way back in '94, just had 4 Birds of Paradise, 4 Curd Apes, 4 Llanowar Elves, 4 Lightning Bolts, 4 Giant Growths. This is just like how you. I mean, we didn't really have a lot of options, man.
You didn't have that many cards, sure. Did you have Orcish Oriflame? Because that was like a restricted card. Did birds with Orcish Oriflame get them?
No, the way I got them was with Giant Growth, man. I was just like, okay, I'll Giant Growth my Birds of Paradise, flying over your moat. It's not like any of my other creatures fly. Like, the only flyers, you've got Birds of Paradise and Shivan Dragon. Done.
Both in your deck.
Yes. Also, Shivan Dragon, Birds of Paradise, the combo, Jake Van Lunen, didn't he spark a Birds of Paradise plus Shivan Dragon combo reunion?
I was going to say Steve Sadin, but yes.
Steve Sadin, yes.
Jake and Steve Sadin all played that deck at Pro Tour Hollywood.
And that was in 2000. Was it 2008?
Barry's era. So
yes, 2008. Like Magic's 15-year anniversary, and boom, Birds of Paradise and Shivan Dragon, kicking it old school like the old days.
The black-green Elves won that Pro Tour, I want to say, and it was like one of Paulo's first top 8s with fairies. I think was Sam in that top 8.
That was not one of his first top 8s. That was like that was like in the first. I think it might have been one early on. I mean, maybe it was one of his first 3 or 4. I don't know. It's hard to keep track.
He has like 11 now, right? Something like that.
Paulo, Luis, Kai, John, of course. I bet you can't even tell me. John is like one of your close friends. I bet you couldn't even tell me how many top 8s he has. Pro Tour top 8s.
John, 16.
Okay, well, okay. Maybe you
I know John. I couldn't tell you how many Luis, Kai, okay, let me see. I would guess Paulo has 11. Is that right?
Dude, I can't keep track. He has 10 or 11.
Yeah, so I don't know. Luis is like, you talk to him every day. How many does he have? Like 7? 10?
Luis is 8 now.
8? I was only one up. I don't count that from last week. I just forgot that one.
Yeah, Luis is like murdering it. Luis is insane. But anyway, separate. But speaking of Birds of Paradise, man, dude, Birds of Paradise, when it's not just the amount that it's blocked or flown. One of the things that's been cool about Birds of Paradise is the way that it interacts with things that call out flying. Like, I know you've earthquaked with your Birds of Paradise and just smiled as you, everybody's Llanowar elves went to the graveyard and your Birds of Paradise are still alive.
No, sure, of course I.
It even helps give you the red, you know?
It certainly does.
And then Birds of Paradise, one of the downfalls, I remember quite a number of discussions back in the early 90s where we were wondering about if flying was even an advantage or not in certain formats, because sometimes people would just want, sometimes your green deck would want to play Hurricane because it was the only finisher you had.
Right? You have
the only reach. It's the only one.
Have you ever done this? You ever had like a Noble Hierarch and then you have a Birds of Paradise?
Yes.
Attack with the Birds of Paradise for 11. Do you ever do that? Because the Birds of Paradise has flying, right? It gets exalted from the Noble Hierarch, but then also goes and gets the +10/+10. It gets in. Do you ever do that one?
+10/+10.
With Lost Alara, what's his name? Scions of
Oh, yes.
Because that's the available attacker as Birds of Paradise.
Josh Utter-Leyton?
Yeah.
Yes. Josh Utter-Leyton, national champion, attack with the Birds of Paradise, put the Eldrazi conscription on it.
That was like the greatest deck. That deck was fantastic. It was so well tuned. I mean, Zvi gets credit for the engine with Lotus Cobra and everything, but Raptor's version, oh my god, I played that deck on Moto.
Oh, the Raptor's one of the coldest who ever did it. Raptor's one of the coldest deck builders who ever did it.
I think I never lost a single tournament match on Moto playing that deck after Raptor made it. I don't think I lost one. It was so good. It's just perfectly tuned. How many times? I think exactly 25 lands, 8 accelerators, and 2 explorers is the right mana base. Oh, sorry, 12 accelerators.
That's
2 explorers.
Literally that's it right there, though. Perfectly tuned. The Josh Utter-Leyton story.
It was perfect. I don't know how you get to 25 lands, 2 explorers, 12 accelerators. Because you only need to attack twice, right? They take their bird gets in for 10. Can they kill your 10/10 or whatever, 10/12 or however big it is, 10/11? So if they can't, you just attack them a second time. It's not a.
I always liked some of the cool stuff. If you've got Birds of Paradise with Noble Hierarch, sometimes sometimes you have to fly over the top, and also there's an ensnaring bridge. Stuff goes on, man. Games get weird sometimes.
It has no power.
I always loved that because Ensnaring Bridge has popped up numerous times over the years. I always loved that just Birds of Paradise by itself could get in innocuously enough, even before there was Noble Hierarch. You could get in with it at 0 and then pump it up with Might of Oaks or whatever if you needed to. Yes. Giant Growths and Berserks, all that. Because that was one of the other decks too back in the early 90s. In 94, late 93, but basically early 94, people were playing Birds of Paradise, Scrib Sprites, Flying Man, Unstable Mutation, Giant Growth, Berserk, all that stuff. Sometimes you just play blue-green with Argothian Pixies and blah, 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 or sometimes you would have red in order to splash Bloodlust. But Birds of Paradise was so awesome. It helped enable the Bloodlust splash if you needed, but it was also sick where sometimes you just go turn 1 Birds of Paradise, turn 2 double Unstable Mutation, get in for 6.
I didn't have some of the fancy cards. I didn't have the Flying Men, and I didn't have the Tropical Island that some of the folks in the store had for that deck. Certainly not the Berserk, but I certainly put multiple Unstable Mutations on my Birds of Paradise.
Oh, yeah.
I did that back in 95, for sure.
Yes.
But speaking of blue and green Birds of Paradise decks together, this is literally my favorite Birds of Paradise story of all time. I think you might know this story as you were a participant in it. So this is the first time I ever got kind of disillusioned with coverage. I read all my feature matches and I'm like, I feel like that's not what happened. Maybe it's actually what happened, but I feel like from where I was sitting, that wasn't my thought process. But I read the coverage of the match that you had against Neil Reeves, and this was one of the best played games I'd ever seen in my life. So you and Neil draw up your hands. Neil's playing just straight black-blue Psychotog, I want to say. Not three. Is he playing 3-color or black-blue? You remember?
I thought it was just black-blue, but I don't recall for sure.
Black-blue Psychotog. You're playing blue-green opposition, right? Nothing fancy, just like you chose all the good cards.
A little fancy. It was the only fancy was the whole madness part.
Yeah, so you draw up your 7, and I look at this hand, and I'm like, this hand is just stone unplayable. It's elf, bird, lands. And I'm like, no, he can't. This doesn't make any sense. And you look at your hand, you put your hand down onto the table, you pick your hand up again, you just go into the tank, and I'm like, oh, he's just putting on a show. Make it look like, he's thinking real hard before he throws this one back. And then you're just like, I'll keep. And then you just proceed to destroy Neil. With this hand, I would have thrown into the ocean. And you just innocuously play the card Compulsion. Did you play out all your birds and elves first, so that you had a ton of mana advantage? Then you played your Compulsion. So in case
I actually dropped Compulsion with 6 mana. I held Compulsion until I had 6 mana, and played it when I had 6 mana, implying I was going to follow it up with Opposition or Squirrel Nest.
Yeah, because opposition was your best card against him, and Squirrel Nest would hold off any but an upheaval Psychotog, right?
Squirrel's Nest was amazing, and Opposition was just by far my best card, and very hard for him.
So the thing is, you played it, right? And then he
I got to do it really fast because I played an elf or bird on 1 and then 2 more on 2. Turn 3, I had 6 mana. So on turn 3, he can only counter 1 spell. And he gives me the opposition so that I don't stick an opposition.
No, he gives you the compulsion.
He gives me the compulsion so that I can't stick an opposition when I have 3 mana creatures already in play, where I'll start mana locking him.
So he lets it stick, and then I'm just like, wait, hold on, what's going on? And then the rest of the game, you just play 3 cards a turn. And it didn't even go to opposition lock. It didn't even go to upheaval because you're spitting out 4/4s and 3/3s for free every second. And you have all the mana in the world because you drew only birds and elves. So it was just and then you just destroyed him with beatdown. And I was just like, oh my god, this kid is pretty good at Magic. That's what I was thinking.
No, it was a good time up until losing in the finals to Dr. Eric Danger Taylor.
That was among your best Grand Prix finishes ever, yeah?
It was a second place finish, and I've never won a Grand Prix. So yeah, it's up there with my best Grand Prix finishes, I guess. But nevertheless, Birds of Paradise definitely did right for me in that event, and that deck was a lot of fun. That whole tournament. There have been a lot of fun tournaments over the years, and Birds of Paradise has appeared in a disproportionately large range of them. Talk about a classic.
So, Birds of Paradise has done Patrick good, and
it's done you well too.
it will let a lot of you guys do good, especially if you never had a Birds of Paradise. It's getting reprinted, and you have an option now.
It's a great card for Commander forever.
Yeah,
but. Conspiracy. This is Conspiracy 2, right? Is technically
this is a new
the way they call it.
Set.
Right. I didn't know if they were calling it Conspiracy 2 or how they were. But yes, the new Conspiracy set is back. Birds of Paradise is back and as good as ever.
All right,
awesome, man. See you next week.
Bye-bye.
Life didn't work so great. Tried to play Dredge just a jailer hate. Ghostly prison waiting for my untapped phase. Your core trapped in amber stasis state. Lost a lot of friends, got left behind. Had to find a way not to lose my mind. Trapped in